Well, this is part of our Explainer series, where we pick up one story and we take a look at it from every possible angle. Today we're looking at the petrol prices. Now, petrol prices have crossed 100 rupees a litre in some parts of the country, and in most of our big cities, they're well above 90 rupees a litre. This is the highest petrol has ever been in India. Diesel is also at an all-time high. And let's get a sense of why petrol is this high, what are the various factors that influence or impact petrol prices in India, and what can be done to bring them down right now. Let's also, to begin with, compare petrol prices in India with all of our neighbors in South Asia right now, and you'll see that there's a marked, sharp difference in the price that we pay and the price that all of our other neighbors pay. In fact, people from Bihar have apparently been smuggling petrol from Nepal. Over the last couple of weeks, there have been an increased number of cases of smuggling of petrol, where people are going across the border and buying petrol in Nepal and bringing it back to Bihar, because you can see that big difference. Nepal is paying about 68, 69 rupees per litre right now. The irony in that story is that Nepal buys its petrol and diesel from India, and you have people now going back to Nepal to bring that, to bring that petrol back. And there's a reason why there's such a sharp difference between what Nepal prices our petrol at and what we price it at, and that is the taxes. To take a look at those taxes, let's put a breakup on the screen. Now, I have to warn you, before we go any further, that this explainer has a lot of data and some graphs and some numbers in it, but it's really not as intimidating as it sounds. And in fact, in order to make it less intimidating, we're going to put up a little picture of a kitten. There you go, on the screen, to make this all seem less scary. So this is the breakup of how fuel is priced in India. This is the Delhi price of petrol to begin with. Now, you'll see that that base price at the top, which says 32 rupees, this is the actual price of the tail. The actual petrol that is refined it costs 32 rupees. There's about 3.5 rupees for the dealer, and the rest is all tax. State and central tax. What you can see as VAT on that screen, that's state taxes, and that varies from state to state. And so the excise duty is central government taxes, and it adds up to about 60 rupees out of the 90 rupees that we're talking about, roughly. So 2/3 of what you're paying right now for petrol or diesel is actually tax. But when asked about why the fuel prices are so high and if they're going to come down, the Union Petroleum Minister Dharmendra Pradhan effectively said, and I quote, "There are two main reasons behind fuel prices rise. The international market has reduced fuel production, and manufacturing countries are producing less fuel for more profit. This is making consumer countries suffer." Now, India is a consumer country. Let's understand this, and let's actually take a look at what the minister has said. Now, petrol, diesel, LPG, CNG, these are all products of crude oil. India buys most of its crude oil or imports most of its crude oil, but we have massive capacity of refining that crude oil and making these products that I talked about. In fact, India is one of the biggest exporters of the finished product. But we buy about 83% of our crude oil requirement, which is imported. We buy it from overseas. And crude oil obviously has a traded price on a daily basis. So the minister is right in the sense that the price of fuel that we're paying in India is directly linked to the global price of crude oil. And over the years between 2010, 2014, and again 2017, the price of fuel was deregulated in India, which means that the Indian government doesn't control or doesn't decide the price. It's moving on a daily basis based on the global price of crude. Now, let's take a look at how the global price of crude has moved over the last 1 year. And before we put that chart up, we should also bring in the kitten. There you have it. All right, so this is the price of crude over the last 1 year, and I've used what is known as the Indian basket of crude. This comes from government data, and it's an average of Dubai, Oman, and Brent. It gives us an idea of where India buys from and what India is paying. And if you look at that line graph, you can see that sharp uptick, right? It was about $20 a barrel in April, and it's gone up to about $55 a barrel now in January, and that's really the punishment that we're seeing in our petrol prices and our diesel prices as well. That's the uptick, and that's the impact that we're seeing. But this is not the full picture. In order to get the full picture, we have to go back 10 years and look at the movement of this same India basket of crude over the last 10 years with the help of Architin, of course. And you'll see two very interesting things on the chart that you're looking at. First of all, you'll see that the price in April that we're talking about at $20 a barrel was a really unusual price. This is not what it normally is. And there's a reason why it fell so sharply. Because of COVID, the whole world was in a lockdown. People were not driving their cars. There was low demand for fuel, and so prices crashed. And that's the $20 a barrel that we're looking at. But if you look back a little further, between 2012 to 2014, the price of crude was at $100 a barrel or more than that. So $100 down to $20, now at about $50, $60, which is where we are right now. Now, if you consider the minister's statement that, we're directly linked to the global price of crude, and we've had the finance minister and the petroleum minister tell us this, if that were true technically, when the prices were down to $20 a barrel, we should have been paying half of what we're paying right now, technically, right? At least. But that was not true. So let's take a look at what we were paying for petrol at these 3 points, at $100, at $20, and again, where we are today. So in 2012, in Mumbai, we were about 73 rupees for petrol, which is cheaper than where we are right now. In 2014, we were at 87 rupees and 77 paise on average, still cheaper than where we are right now. And crude was well over $100 a barrel. In April this year, when crude was $20 a barrel, what were we paying? We were paying 75 rupees a litre in Mumbai and 76 rupees a litre in Mumbai in May. So where is that connection then? If we are completely dependent on the global price and there is no sort of local influence at all, how is it when the price crashed to $20 a barrel, we saw no benefit of that? And that is in the taxes. So there are actually two components that influence the price of petrol in India. One is the global price of crude, which I just explained to you. The other is the taxes. Remember that chart I put up earlier? So the excise duty plus VAT, that's the tax that we're talking about, and that's 2/3 of what we're paying right now. In fact, the government last year, when the price fell to $20 a barrel, increased its taxes by 13 rupees, and that's a massive jump. So it took it up to 32 rupees per litre of petrol, and that was the central government taxes, and various state governments also increased their taxes. And the justification at that point was, hey, COVID, we need the money right now to fight the virus, we need the money right now to look after people, and that's why we're doing it. So at that point, the difference, which should have been a benefit that came to citizens if we were directly linked, actually went directly to the government, because the argument was at that point the government needed the money in its coffers. So now the question is, when the price was low, the government increased taxes and we were still paying the same. But now the price has gone up and the taxes are the same, and we're paying 100 rupees for petrol in some parts of the country. So the argument, the question that has to be asked at this point is, will the government reduce taxes on humanitarian grounds to decrease the burden on citizens? Now, again, the petroleum minister speaking to Parliament in the latest session of Parliament made a statement saying that the government does not have any plans, the central government doesn't have any plans to reduce the tax on petrol or diesel. Most state governments as well have a lowered income because of the GST switch. They have only two options to actually bring in money, either alcohol or petrol and diesel. Not too much alcohol may have been sold in the last 1 year because bars and clubs were shut. So that leaves you with petrol and diesel. Also remember that state governments have also foot the bill for a large amount of healthcare and welfare work that they've done during the lockdown. But having said that, West Bengal, Assam, Rajasthan, Meghalaya have decided to cut taxes to provide some relief to citizens. So now the question really is about the central government. Will the central government be able to do the same? The The Prime Minister, in one of his speeches recently, suggested that it was our dependency on imported crude that really is the problem. He said previous governments should have reduced this dependency on imported crude. Now, to be fair, this is not the first time the Prime Minister has made this suggestion. Back in 2015, he had actually set a target for India, saying we will reduce our dependency on imported crude oil by 10%, and we will halve it by 2030. And that was the target that he had placed for the country, but we haven't come anywhere near achieving that target. In fact, we've gone in the opposite direction. So to give you an example, let's bring back the kitten. We've gone from a dependency of 77% to 84% in the last 5 years alone. And this has happened largely because we've been consuming more petrol and diesel as a country because we're growing, but we haven't increased our capacity of production of crude oil in any way. In fact, ONGC, which is our biggest producer of crude oil, doesn't have any cash on its books right now because it used all of its money to buy shares in Hindustan Petroleum Corp and Gujarat State Petroleum Corp, and so now they have less cash and less ability to increase their capacity. The other plan that the country had was to increase our consumption of biofuel, which is basically a fuel that you mix with regular petrol and diesel in order to bring down your consumption. And this fuel is made out of farm products like sugarcane, for example. But we haven't really managed to make a dent in that process at all. There's another suggestion that the increase of petrol and diesel prices is actually to encourage more electric vehicles, but that's really impractical at this point because we don't have enough options of electric vehicles or affordable options of electric vehicles in the market, and there aren't enough charging points, so there's no infrastructure for it. Technically, effectively, you have a car that you have to bring back to your house every so many kilometers to charge again, because there are no charging ports anywhere in our cities, or there aren't enough, even if there are one or two. So it's not practical right now to replace the petrol diesel dependent cars at this point. So none of these have actually worked out as solutions. So this is where we are. The government has a choice, either to reduce taxes on petrol and diesel on humanitarian grounds, or to continue to collect these taxes. And let's look at the arguments on both sides. If the prices remain high, especially for diesel, it affects every essential commodity that you buy, whether it is milk or vegetable, rice, dal, anything that comes into the city or into our homes comes in on the back of diesel driven trucks. And these trucks are already, from the Truckers Association, we know, under tremendous pressure over the rising prices and the lockdown and the reduced economy, that the prices of every commodity will increase when the price of diesel increases. Given the fact, and I can say this from experience because we've been out shooting in Mumbai, at least, the number of people who've lost their jobs, who were working small jobs, who've lost their jobs, the difficulty in making ends meet at this point, and the pressure of higher LPG prices and the pressure of higher commodity prices will really cause suffering to the urban poor and to the poor in our country if prices go up any further. So that is really the humanitarian argument. On the other side, you have the argument of the government. The government says, hey, you know what, we need to develop this country, we need to spend money to revive the economy, we need to build infrastructure. Where is the money going to come from if we don't collect it in taxes? And every government has used petrol and diesel because petrol and diesel is a really easy way to collect the taxes. There's almost no tax evasion. It goes straight from the pump to the government, and it's really not a product that people can stop using because the prices have gone up. So it's not really a price sensitive product that way. It's just pain that people have to absorb. So on one hand, there's the argument that the government has to continue its development, and so it needs the money in a year where tax revenues from other sources have come down because the economy is weak. On the other hand, we have the humanitarian argument of the fact that people are simply not going to be able to put food on the table if the prices continue to be this high. It's not a problem that I envy in any way because it's a really difficult problem to solve. We're going to have to watch and see what the government decides. Now, remember, the questions of reducing our dependency on imported fuel, bringing in biofuel or electric vehicles are really long-term solutions. It's going to take a very long time to achieve any sort of headway in those with those solutions. But in the meantime, as vaccination, sort of finds its way across the world, and the world begins to open up again, and people start to move around as normal, the price of crude will go up because demand will come back. And if the government doesn't decide to cut taxes, then we are going to see these prices soar much higher than 100 rupees a litre. So this is a time-bound problem which will need an immediate solution. So we're going to watch to see what the government actually decides to do. But I hope you found this breakup of what the problem is useful. Share it with anybody else who might find this explainer useful as well, and give us your suggestions on what topics you'd like us to break down for you in the future. Thanks for watching.